Okay, while we're sort of setting up, let me set the stage. So I'm here representing Building Smart Canada, and what we're trying to do today is to talk about standards that are being developed, and how people are going to deal in the broader context with what these standards are. And what we're talking about, there's lots of standards being developed. Let's talk about collaboration, open data standards, and sharing data within a collaborative, open, spatial visualization environment. And the participants here, and why we've chosen a particular panel, is it's very, very standards-based. We have federal, provincial, municipal government represented here, and we have two professional associations. So there's really two things taking place that I want to communicate today. One is the initiatives that are taking place in government that are engaging standards. How some of the government here is approaching BIM, and how they're getting into it, and the reason why they're doing what they're doing, and in most cases, how the standards are having a role to play, and very much what impact might those standards have in the broader data community and private industry as well. On the end, we have professional associations that are both provincial and national in nature, and they're responsible for implementing asset management, engaging industry and innovation in construction. And all of those are looking at data standards as well. So we're going to bring to the table some of the events that are taking place and have a discussion about that and give you it. Now, we're going to try to engage the public, and I think we still have 50 minutes if I'm correct, but throw us off the stage. So let me start with Veronica. So what you saw on her slide up there, you may have noticed there was something about Oslo, Norway, and a commitment that the Assistant Deputy Minister of PSPC made in Oslo, Norway. And that was a commitment for the adoption and support of open BIM within the environment of PSPC. So I'd like to, because everyone from the presentation are aware of the initiatives that are going on, perhaps you could give us an idea of what's the impact of, first, why did he make that statement? It's an international commitment. What's the impact within PSPC? What impact may that have on other government agencies you're working with? And I guess what I'd like to know, and you may not be able to answer it, do you perceive that type of a commitment may in time reflect into the private industry and perhaps the contracting that's going on?
Okay. So I think any public statement by a federal entity ultimately has a significant impact. Whether it's about BIM, whether it's about asbestos, whether it's about anything really. And I do think that, to be really honest, I don't think too many people understand what kind of a commitment he's made. Okay, and even within our own organization, it's not well understood. But I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think what it does is opened up the door for different parts within our department, the contracting, the legal, the owner-investor, the ones that I mentioned in my presentation, to have a discussion about how that commitment needs to be considered as we move forward. We, in our organization, have challenges with, standards and or systems and or software that hasn't taken a standard approach, that's taken a proprietary approach, or that's taken, like I'll give you an example. Many years ago, and it's the sign of the times, our department decided to focus just on using AutoCAD, right? Just that product. Rightfully or wrongfully, it has had impacts over time, right? So I do think that the fact that we're making almost the opposite conscious decision on BIM, I think it's revolutionary to some degree, and it does have an impact on every other federal department, because they are not going to go and procure those tools or that way to assist in operating their facilities without first having seen how we've done it, right? So again, I'll give you a very basic example as a standard. So there is outside of what we've developed, there is no federal standard for managing asbestos. There are requirements within provincial and territorial arenas. They vary differently. The federal department has the luxury and/or detriment, whichever way you look at it, not to be obliged to follow any other level of government in terms of legislation. So often we're faced with having to develop our own. So in this case, we've decided not to. That's really, it's a big statement. So moving forward, whatever Public Service and Procurement Canada does will be looked at as, do other departments follow it, yes or no? Now, in the broader context, and something that I mentioned, the only influence we're going to have is goodwill. And if we want to make any further advancements than just goodwill, we are going to have to engage central agencies, Treasury Board, PCO. But having said that, we've already done that for asbestos. We've already done that for Legionella, and it's been successful, so there's no reason why this can't be either. Timelines, I think it would be really, really important to try and achieve all those things within the current mandate of the current government, and or hopefully if there's a future one, because every time there's a change in government, we almost start again in terms of priorities. Okay.
Yeah, and I wish, I see John's arrived from D&D, and I'm not going to put you on the spot, John, but I'd love to have a comment from you. And the reason why I say that is, if you recognize the slide that went up for the amount of square footage that PSPC controls and are managing, but you saw on the other part of the slide the percentage of infrastructure that D&D owns. And Alan had the question about procurement centralized to Ottawa. If you look at D&D, who are actively engaged in BIM, BIM standards, BIM adoptions within their projects, and I think I'm right, John, there are 1,500 sites across Canada with approximately 32 military bases. And that infrastructure, which is very important, is vertical and linear. And part of the discussion today, we're going to be talking about BIM open model standards that are being developed for linear infrastructure and partnerships right now. And if we look at the amount of infrastructure out there and how much is linear, we're now going to have open BIM standards for linear infrastructure developed. So, moving on to Raphael at Alberta Infrastructure, give us an idea of some of the initiatives that are going on in Alberta.
Sure. So, as some of you might be aware, who attended the last CanBIM session in Calgary, one of our assistant deputy ministers, Neil McFarlane, did the keynote speech there, and he came out proclaiming that that BIM will be used on all future capital projects at Alberta Infrastructure. And that's very much true. So at Alberta Infrastructure, we have a portfolio of about 2,000 plus facilities worth well in excess of $10 billion. We have quite ambitious BIM visions and goals for Alberta Infrastructure, and that proclamation that we are going to do BIM, and by BIM I mean full lifecycle BIM from concept through to facilities management, is very much taking place right now. What we've managed to do so far is we have 6 or 7 quite major projects on the go right now, worth approximately $2 billion, that have some quite stringent BIM requirements in the contract. And these projects range from, they have different project delivery methods. We have some design build, some design bid build, some construction management in the mix. And we are very much approaching this from a facilities management point of view. So we recognize that at Alberta Infrastructure that the majority of the life cycle cost of a building is in facilities management and in the operations of the building. So it's kind of that 80-20 rule. So what we're focusing on our BIM standards and requirements is on what our facilities management teams need to maintain these buildings over the next 40, 50, 100, or whatever years. So that is very much happening right now. We are going to be releasing a set of provincial standards by the end of the year, maybe a couple of months into 2018. And like I said, all future projects at Alberta Infrastructure will be BIM.
So when you talk about provincial standards, give us an example of what exactly that is.
Again, what we're focusing on is facilities management.
Okay.
So what we really want to emphasize is the fact that we want a digital handover. So we're actually not calling them BIM standards, we're calling them digital project delivery and handover standards. And we want to make sure that when the project is finished, we don't get boxes and boxes of O&M manuals, of rolls of drawings. For us, that's an antiquated method of delivering a project. We want a full digital delivery, such that it takes us hours to put this into our maintenance management systems, our IWMS, rather than the years and years it takes right now, if it's even done. So that is the vision of our standards.
Now, I also understand you're working with, I believe you've set some type of a partnership up with the Saskatchewan government and looking at cooperation on this?
We are, we've engaged in talks with Saskatchewan. They are also interested in what we're doing. I'd say they're probably at the beginning of their journey with BIM, so they're very much interested in collaborating with us and maybe following what we're doing in terms of our provincial standards.
And I'd like to thank also Alberta. They've been working with Building Smart, and we've been trying to work with other levels of government across Canada. And they have been excellent in making calls with us, being on conference calls, and helping other levels of government across Canada understand the level and direction that they're taking, what they're trying to do from a facilities management point of view, and also to look at the overall issue that we have to address, and that is that we're going to have a whole bunch of additional data coming in, particularly the municipal environment. Municipalities control, I think it's 52% of public infrastructure. It's a huge amount of public infrastructure. And if you look at it, the environment they're in today, that environment is traditionally a GIS-oriented 2D environment. And we're going to have to start addressing this, the bigger issue of how does all of this data that's going to start to come, how is it going to be shared, and how are we going to deal with it? And we'll talk with one of the municipalities shortly on that. If we look at the smaller municipalities, they're trying to get into BIM, and they're trying to find a process to get in. And I think with Nicole in Oakville, perhaps we could hear from her what they're trying to do in the initiatives that they have in Oakville.
Sure. So my department, Facilities and Construction Management, manages buildings from cradle to grave. So we do have a facilities management section. We have operations, and capital construction. I deal with capital construction, so project management, project managers who are doing new builds, capital replacements, all sizes. We are very new to the BIM world, from construction in any case, and we were introduced to it as we moved into our first IPD project, so Integrated Project Delivery. So if anyone knows anything about that, it's really, in a few words, it's about collaboration between all the parties. So it's collaboration between the architect, the engineers, the trades, the general contractor, the owner, and the IPD model promotes and encourages real deep collaboration. It's not about talking about collaboration. You actually have to work together to realize the values for all parties. So from the point of view of the owner, we're looking for greater value for our money, obviously. We're spending money, we want to get greater value. And the architect, the engineers, the contractors, they want to deliver a good product, they want to deliver a good building, and also make money. So we have found that the IPD model is working very well with us. In terms of BIM, I've been exposed to various systems. We did use a point cloud to build the arena model because it's an existing heritage building that we had to preserve. Of course, we're doing energy modeling in the project as it's tracking for LEED Silver. We are stuck in AutoCAD, so it's a Revit model. The department, even the town, doesn't have any facility for anything else right now. And obviously the Revit model is being used to its full extent. And then to varying degrees with the trades, depending on their sophistication, they're using BIM for scheduling during construction as well as cost estimating. We're not looking at facilities management at this point. There's really no capacity in the town for that right now. I want to look how we're going to move towards that. We definitely have a strong 2D GIS system, but we don't have anything towards 3D. And we don't right now have the capability on facilities operations staff to move to that. We are starting a new project, though, again using IPD, and BIM is integral to that. And I'm looking at how we can advance the use of BIM in this project and what it's going to mean in the future for our work. Mm-hmm. Certainly for larger construction projects, we are going to move to BIM for sure because there's just too much value in it. So regardless of the contract model we go with for larger constructions, it'll definitely be BIM.
So the scanning of the existing facility to collect that, was the outcome of that then a 2D CAD result, or was it actually?
It was a 3D.
You created the 3D point cloud. Did you create graphics from that as a 2 or 3D graphic model?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is there a plan then to integrate that with the new BIM structure, and then ultimately in the process deliver, if you like, a sustainable BIM model that you can maintain for the maintenance of the facility?
We looked at that early on, and it is definitely integrated. We have a full BIM model for the building, and we're right now in construction, so we've gone through many iterations of it. My concern was that right now we don't have the facility to do that. Okay. We don't have the staff with the right capabilities, and it would also be connected to, it would have to be connected into our asset management system.
Right.
We've gone very deeply into J.D. Edwards.
Okay.
So not sure how we're going to bridge that right now. Ideally, it would be great, but we're not there yet.
Okay, excellent. So I think that leads very well into my colleague Andrew at York Region and their perspective on how they're dealing with data. And the thing that I am very interested with at York, you're not seeing it called GIS department anymore. You're seeing data analytics and visualization. So maybe, Andrew, you could talk a little bit about that and what you're trying to achieve.
It's kind of heavy. Sure. So just want to give a tiny bit of background. York Region's home to about 1.1 million people. We spend about $942 million this year on capital projects. My view of government coming from data and analytics and visualization is it's a lot about information flows going through the organization. Used to be, and I think Veronica was kind of alluding to this somewhat in her presentation, Departments have got their own portfolios, and traditionally they've managed to operate pretty independently within those, but increasingly departments are having to work together, and so information flows through an organization are becoming way more important. One of the areas of that is around infrastructure assets. The pipes are underneath the roads. Those are two different departments, but they got to work together. Our existing practice is, in terms of how that information is flowing from the contractors to the region, is we get PDFs. Tell me about the intelligence that's in a PDF when there's been a whole pile of engineering done. So as an organization, we're missing out on that information content, and we have very little to take forwards into the future on an asset that's going to last, 100 years or so, or it's going to morph a whole bunch in that time. But what we're doing is we're re-engineering every single time we touch that asset, and it's extremely expensive to do that. So when I look at information flows, I think we need to track those models of information and manage those through that life cycle. So what our problems are, I think is that there's incredibly little awareness of the building information modeling capabilities within the municipal sector. Actually, I came to this group last year and learned a whole pile, and since then I've been going around our organization trying to promote BIM, had some successes, but by and large what I find is a tremendous number of the engineers have no idea what BIM even stands for. They have no idea of the capabilities. Those who are aware of BIM tend to think of it as being a slightly more rich version of CAD. They certainly don't see much of the possibilities of passing that over into the operations, and largely capital delivery groups sort of pass a little bit of information over onto the operations side, but that's the information flow challenge. When I start engaging the engineers, I get some resistance from some people because they've already got their patterns of doing things, but some people are receptive. And over the last year, I was able to engage a project manager in our property services group, and I actually brought people in from York University to help persuade them of the advantages of using BIM in facilities management. And the consequence of that is that we're now using BIM consciously. The actual project managers are aware that it's happening. We got the architect who'd already used BIM, project manager completely unaware of that. We managed to get that model passed on to the general contractor. Hopefully one day we will actually get that then passed on to our facilities group. We got a couple of years to figure that out because it's not in any of the contracts. So we'll of course be asking for it for free. No, we'll try and figure something out. And now I've got the people who are involved in that project and using them to educate the next group. And now our environmental services group is trying to identify a pilot project where we will actually put BIM requirements into the initial contract with the intention of following that all the way through to the operations. From the information flow perspective, that, as Raphael was saying, the savings are immense on the municipal side for operations. That's probably enough.
No, that's excellent. So, and I guess this is an area that I'll jump in for a minute and sort of put 2 cents in. So I come from the geospatial area, and I guess I'm a GIS person, they tell me. And what I'm interested in here is taking the approach of data analytics and visualization. When we're looking at visualization is it's the visual component of collaboration. If we look, and I'll choose the municipal environment because of the amount of infrastructure, particularly linear infrastructure that they have. If we look traditionally, the BIM world and a BIM model is totally alien to a CAD in the sense of a 2D world and a GIS environment. Today, the largest enterprise collaborative visualization environments, if you like, is GIS, and it's 2D or 2.5D. And I think what organizations have to start to look at, and where we're coming from the standards point of view, is how do you create a model that can be analyzed, that can be shared with in a visual environment a municipality? Can you do that within a GIS, or are you going to call it that big GIS? I call it big geospatial. And I don't think it'll be a GIS environment that's displaying that, a GIS visualization environment that's displaying that combined information. It's going to be a visualization environment, and that visualization environment will be applications that are taking data from all of those environments and displaying it the way they want with the associated data attached. The question is, will the model that they're looking at in this screen be an object-based dynamic model, and when you make a change to the model, the intelligence that was inherent in that parametric model that was created in BIM, whether it's there or not. Today, if you see in the GIS environment, it is not. They're subtracting the information that's necessary to display it in a GIS-like manner. The future collaborative environment, in my opinion, is going to be one where the model interacts with the land-based GIS, and you will be able to take the intelligence of that model and use it in a visualization environment. And these are the new tools that I think that are going to start to be developed. So that's a great segue into OGRA.
Yeah, can I just add?
Yeah, sorry.
So just to build a little bit on that idea, when I was talking about that information flow kind of thing, we've got pipe projects, we've got road projects, we've got the pumping station projects, 3 very different kinds of projects, but they all work together. And from a visualization perspective, on a regional level, we need to be able to see all of that in one kind of view to give that's pretty much how we actually going to end up managing our assets. You don't do a road project and ignore what's underneath it. So yeah, we really do have to get that kind of large-scale integration of the information, and that's the big data kind of angle on BIM. So BIM is also going to transform. It's going to get engaged with a whole pile more information about users, residents, how they're using that those assets, traffic modeling and things. That's what drives some of this stuff. So we want to eventually bring those BIM models into traffic management studies, things like that. There's an entirely different kind of software there.
So, Scott, give a little bit of background on OGRA, and let's talk about what's taking place.
Hope I didn't steal your thunder.
No, trust me, I have lots of thunder to share today. So OGRA, I'll preface this by saying I'm not an engineer, I'm not an accountant. I do speak engineeringese, and I do get paid to speak engineeringese to people who speak English and make political decisions. That said, OGRA has been around since 1894. We've sort of established ourselves as, I guess, leaders. We like to say leaders in the asset management world at the municipal level. Our organization's comprised of, our membership is 433 or 444 municipalities in Ontario, and they join our membership. They join our organization for 2 reasons. One, we put on a really great party in February every year. You all should come. And number 2 is to advocate for their infrastructure interests on behalf of the municipal sector as a whole. It has been a journey that we've been on, let's say, for 12 years in terms of pushing this. Listening to the conversation today, it almost, I don't know whether to throw my hands up in exasperation and fall over and begin crying or laughing. The aspiration that's contained in a lot of the comments and a lot of the analysis that's been shared is completely alien to most of the communities in this province. York Region has $942 million in capital projects this year. Currently, 1/4 of the municipalities in Ontario, if they raise their property tax, any idea how much they generate? Anyone want to take a guess? I'll buy you coffee if you get it right. 1% equals, for 1/4 of the population, or 1/4 of the number of municipalities, less than $20,000. So your property taxes go up, your community gets $20,000 or less. The challenge is that those communities and communities on the whole, and we're really talking about 375 of 444 municipalities being what we would call small. The challenge for them is wrapping their heads around what they have, what condition it is in, where it's located, how they're going to begin building out a plan to address it, and then more importantly, how they're actually going to begin building out a plan to actually finance what's required of those assets. To say that this is a large task is an underestimation. When we began this process, we used to use those weasel words that people always use. You know, should, could, would be nice, it'd be great, we see benefits. And finally we got fed up with this because the people at Queen's Park, who we deal with primarily, weren't responding. So we brought out the hammer and said, you need to regulate asset management planning at the local level. And to our amazement, they did it. They didn't do it in the way we would have liked it done, but they've done it nonetheless. And what this has done is it's given rise to a groundswell of focus and, I would say, anxiety at the local level about how they're going to flesh out these asset management plans. We're looking at a new regulation coming into effect January 1st, 2018 in Ontario, and that regulation is going to stipulate over the next 4 years what municipalities from the City of Toronto to Manitowoc and everywhere in between are going to have contained in their asset management plans. This has been, and it will be, an extraordinary wake-up call for the industry as a whole, because municipalities are now going to be obligated to have their heads wrapped around what their assets, what state their assets are in, and how they're actually going to finance them. There's also new provisions in there, such as levels of service. You have to have some consideration given for climate change. This is further down the road. And then the other thing that's going to be novel is they're going to have a strategic policy adopted by council that actually stipulates how they're going to approach asset management planning. BIM is not on the radar of the vast majority, and when I say the vast majority, I mean probably almost all of them. If it's not in the radar in York Region, it's not in the radar in Manitowoc, I can guarantee you. They're still living in an Excel world, right? A lot of them haven't even proprietary software for managing their information. So that said, I think that it's important, and it's going to become increasingly important to have these conversations. It's going to be important to take the standards that are being offered by BIM and figure out how you work with communities of all scales in order to integrate that in, because the reality is the communities have not been doing it, and they haven't been doing it for a number of different reasons. We don't have enough time today to actually talk about what those reasons are, but nonetheless they haven't been done. And if you can figure out a way to begin having those conversations with the powers that be, in order to get people aligned with taking meaningful action, you're likely to see a lot of advancement very quickly. It is somewhat disheartening when the federal government says that they operate on goodwill in terms of advancing BIM standards. I mean, it's the federal government. They make laws all the time. They design standards all the time, but seemingly when it comes to this, every sort of level of government typically throws their hands up. We have been arguing with Queen's Park for 6 years now about coming up with a uniform definition for measuring the width of a road. We haven't gotten anywhere yet. There's still 5 different ways to do that. It's up to you to decide what you want. And that's one asset, but it's an asset that every municipality except for one, County of Frontenac, owns. Every municipality owns roads. It's the most valuable capital-intensive asset that they typically own, and we can't even come up with a way to measure the width. It seems, well, on the one hand, it seems very aspirational what we're talking about today, and I think no one would take exception about what the end goals are. From the vantage point of Ontario municipalities, it seems almost unintelligible in terms of what's actually required to get us to where we need to go.
So
I don't mean to be Debbie Downer, by the way.
No. Well, let me quickly jump in so that I guess we're going to be making up the lost time, so we're a little short here. So let me quickly jump in here, something about OGRA. So what I'm very interested in is what they've been trying to do about asset management in the process, and obviously because of the linear infrastructure. So as many of you are aware, in the BIM standards that are being developed for vertical infrastructure, we're using an IFC format to create a neutral environment for that data to be shared. About, I think it's 2-3 years ago, the OpenGIS Consortium and Building Smart International created a letter of intent and then a memorandum of understanding, have been working together now to integrate and create the standards for linear infrastructure and create a standard for the data and the data model for linear infrastructure, and it's called Infra GML under the Land Infra Group workshop. That OGRA are working and have signed a letter of intent and are working with Building Smart Canada on an investigation and looking at what Infra GML effect it will have on linear infrastructure related to asset management planning. So we have in place a letter, and they are representing Canada with Building Smart Canada to look at Infra GML. So I know we're time. So the last but not least on the end, Pierre, with Canadian Construction Innovation. So two things, Pierre. Quick, what you do in the industry to represent it, and a very quick statement on where we have to go to adopt BIM in Canada.
All right, thank you very much. I'll be very brief. By way of background, CC Innovations came into existence in 2014. That was the result of a number of leaders within the industry who wanted to create a new entity in Canada that would have as a sole purpose to improve performance in the industry, and to do that through innovation. So our mission, really, our mandate, is to instill a new culture for construction innovation in Canada. And our vision is to provide this industry with the tools, materials, processes, and systems so that this industry can realize its full potential. As it is now, there's much to be done in each of those areas. In doing so, we created an ecosystem. So the one thing was very clear to us at the get-go is that we had to have all the key players, stakeholders around the table. And so we have construction owners, DCC is there, we have SNC-Lavalin and engineers, we have architects, we have contractors, subcontractors, manufacturers, suppliers, we have the insurance and bonding industry, and claims consultants, because as you can expect, they're much needed in these days in the environment in which we are. Collectively, they do about $25 billion a year, so that has given us the strength and the knowledge and the wisdom to move ahead. You know, when you are in the innovation, one thing is very clear is that you go by project and by project, and to do that you need funding, and the government is spending billions of dollars now in innovation, but the problem that we see there is that they are molded by government programs which don't necessarily align themselves very well with what we're trying to do. So we're working hard with the different departments, funding entities, so that we can deliver on our mandate. And this is why perhaps we have not yet tackled BIM. BIM has been a priority for CCI, wanting to work with CanBIM and the group here. But to do that, you need to have some funding, and we're working hard on that. I appeared before the House Finance Committee just this week on Tuesday, and we made it very clear that the programs set by government need to align themselves better with industry. I'll give you one example. The Prime Minister, when elected, said to his ministers that industry innovation kind of needs to be led by industry. Industry needs to work with the provincial, municipal governments, as well as the federal government. We need to involve academia, and we need to involve Indigenous people as well, wherever it applies. And so our mandate is to do just that. We're looking at finalizing deals, if you wish, with governments so that we can access some funds to move ahead on BIM. It's interesting to know that, Gord, you want the focus on linear infrastructure. And that France, not too long ago, agreed to spend $10 million on BIM standards. There hasn't been a penny spent by this government on BIM as of yet. And that's something that we need to resolve. The way that CCI work, and we're not...
1 minute, Pierre.
1 minute, yeah, I'm almost done. We're not an association, we are an institute, and the difference here is that we don't work by committees. So what we do, and we would like to work with these groups, identify areas of concern, areas where we need to change, and bring things to market and to commercialize that. And in doing that, then we create clusters, we create incubators, and you work tirelessly until such time that you have a solution, and that solution then is brought to market. That's all we do. And so when we look at the roadmap that was described, and the previous speaker who said that tenants will expect more of their buildings, and we will have to have more performing buildings, I think BIM will then start to grow exponentially, but to get there, there's much to be done. So I think that through clusters, incubators, step by step, we'll get there, and I think CCL will want to play that role.
Thank you. So I would invite everyone, if you have a chance, we won't have time to ask questions, please feel free to approach any of us at the break, and we'd be pleased to answer any questions you have. Thank you very much.